salmon is really good.
Yeah, so's the chicken. It's okay. But the vegetables are a little overcooked.
Look over there. It's a magician. He's at that other table.
Oh, I hope he doesn't come over here. I hate card tricks.
Look, he's pulling cards out of his mouth.
The lady looks like she's going to throw up any
Oh,
moment.
God. Ugh. Do you want the rest of my salmon?
No, I don't think so. Will you pass the bread, please?
Yeah, here.
Thanks. Well, stop looking at him or he's going to come over here. It's kind of like the traveling mariachis. I knew it. Check it out. He's borrowing money. It's so obvious. They always want money. Hell, I'd give him money not to come over here.
He's making it float.
No, it's not floating. It's jiggling. He's using that string that you can't see. Kind of like a spider's web. You know, they all do it.
Oh, God, look at that woman that he's performing for. The one in the green? Look at her. She's looking at him like, boy, are you a jerk.
Well, now it's a quarter. Yeah, he's doing that quarter trick with a cigarette.
They all do that. Even I know that. Look. Did you see that? He just switched the coins.
From the right to the left hand, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice technique, bozo.
I suppose the question most often asked me when I give talks to groups of magicians is this question of what to do with the heckler. The heckler remains one of the most important problems for a great many magicians. And so we ask, how can we best deal with hecklers during our performances? In my view, ultimately, the heckler is a problem in relationship, but I certainly don't expect you to understand fully what I mean by that statement at this point in our exploration. The first thing we need to ask ourselves, so that we're clear about it in our thinking, is this: what is a heckler anyway? Almost all magicians use this label. What do they mean when they use it? What do you mean when you use it? We use the word, don't we, for people who exhibit a certain kind of behavior. Isn't the word heckler a label that we use for anyone who interrupts us in a way we don't like during a performance? The heckler interrupts us during a performance with a comment, perhaps a joke, and since we don't like that, we don't want to be interrupted, we label him or her with this essentially negative label. For one of the other things that most of us have learned during our time in magic is that hecklers are bad and we don't like them. We all learned this a long time ago, and most of us still believe it. Hecklers are bad and we don't like them, and they ought to be stopped. Well, how shall we deal with these bad people, these interrupters, these hecklers? A quick perusal of the magic literature gives us what is probably the most popular answer. We heckle them back. This is what my friend Danny Orleans once called out-heckling the heckler. Basically, we throw a one-line comic put-down at the heckler and hope that he will shut up. These one-liners are called heckler stoppers in the literature. In my book, Secrets and Mysteries, I call this way of dealing with the heckler the traditional approach, the approach that we've all learned, and I suggested that it is risky business for several reasons. First, for this approach to work, you must be good, and you must also be quick in coming up with one-line put-downs. And this isn't easy at all. And what is even more difficult is turning this sort of interaction into a show that is entertaining for everyone else. Some few performers do have this talent. Most performers don't. The second reason the traditional approach is problematic is because it creates the kind of person the audience perceives me to be. This is the question of character. In short, am I, or do I want to be perceived as, someone who makes rude and nasty comments to people, even if they're provoked? Now, even if these two reasons for rethinking the traditional approach to hecklers weren't enough, and I personally think that they are enough, the most impressive problem is that the traditional approach in today's world just may not work. After all, the heckler stopper one-liner is presumed to work for the following reason. The heckler is expected to be so devastated by the performer's tacky remark that he is stunned and/or embarrassed into silence. Perhaps in the 1940s or 50s, when Robert Orban was in his prime, collecting those heckler stoppers magicians still use today, this might have been the case. In the 1990s, I'm afraid that the traditional approach can very easily generate endless combativeness, where he says something, you say something, he says something else, you say something else, he says something else, and everybody wonders what happened to the show. Unless the performer is really good at this sort of thing, so that this repartee now is the show has fallen apart. For myself, then, I am highly suspect of this traditional approach of out-heckling the heckler with rude one-liners. The truth is that I really don't enjoy insulting people in public, and further, this isn't the kind of person that I want people, potential clients, to see when they see me. More than that, this isn't the kind of person I want to be in my life. Now, if this is the kind of person you want to be, you certainly have my blessing and all of my wishes for good fortune. Like so many other things in magical presentation, what we do with the heckler is rather intensely personal. And it is intensely personal in two senses. First, what we do with the heckler, how we handle this moment, in part defines who we are. Second, how we handle the heckler is intensely personal in the sense that what works for one performer would be a disaster for another. The image one performer wishes to convey would be, for another performer, complete lunacy and madness. Well, if I personally choose not to turn to the traditional approach for handling interrupters, what do I do? As a close-up magician, surely people do on occasion interrupt me, and so it is a fair question to ask me how I deal with these interruptions. Right from the start, the first thing that I want to do is to eliminate the label heckler from my mental file cabinet of labels. For me, it serves no useful purpose at all. On the contrary, using the label, with all its past associations, my past learning about how awful hecklers are, only serves to get me in a mentally combative state, ready to fight. And this is exactly what I don't want for myself during a performance. But I also think the word heckler should be dropped from my mental inventory of labels because, as a label, it ignores some basic and essential differences between people. People, for example, can interrupt a close-up magician for more than one reason. One person might interrupt because he thinks the magician is a rude and insensitive jerk, and with his interruption wants to give the performer some of his own medicine. On the other hand, Another person might interrupt the magician because he thinks that his comment, his interruption, will enhance everyone else's enjoyment and fun. In this second case, even though the heckler's motives are the same as ours, like us, he wants entertainment and fun. If we don't want to be interrupted, we still label him with this essentially bad label. One of the real problems with using the label heckler, then, is that it encourages us to treat these two persons with their two quite different motives in much the same way. And in the close-up magic setting, that doesn't make much sense. So, the first thing I want to do is stop thinking of people who interrupt me as hecklers. The second thing I want to do is to understand that how one reacts to interruptions from the stage or the platform might be completely inappropriate in the close-up magic setting. The third thing I want to ask myself is whether the interruption was cruelly negative or an attempt to be part of the fun. While some spectators want nothing more than anonymity, others very much want to be in the group's attention. They want to share the spotlight, if only for a brief moment, and be part of the show. This leads us to a rather important point. Usually, this whole question of what to do with the heckler is discussed in the magical literature solely in terms of what the heckler is doing and how the performer might respond to the heckler's behavior. The presumption is that what the performer is doing is perfectly fine, whereas what the heckler is doing is absolutely out of place. But what if the performer really is acting as a rude and insensitive creep? The interrupter, by pointing that out, might merely be verbalizing what everyone else is thinking. It is, I think, a grave mistake to try to understand the interrupter if we don't also try to understand what we are doing that might be contributing to the interrupter's interruption. Every action, says the Hindu sage, produces a reaction, and this is the law of karma. I'm saying, in other words, that the interruption might simply be a reaction to our behavior, and if we were to change certain things about what we are doing, we might not be encouraging, unconsciously, interruptions. Take a concrete example. Considering the performer whose patter, how I hate that word, is punctuated with ahs and does and unexpected pauses while he tries to remember what to do or what to say next. Isn't it obvious that such a performance encourages people to interrupt them? This is why I have always maintained that the best defense against the interrupter is a smooth, well-polished performance. A polished performance typically doesn't have any openings for the interrupter to interrupt. The strategy, in other words, is not simply to deal with the interruptions after they occur by reacting to them, but rather to focus our attention on ways that we might prevent them from occurring in the first place. The well-polished performance presents us with a performer who is confident and in control of what he or she is doing. This performer's words have been carefully chosen. There are no extraneous actions to distract us from focusing on the effect. The performer's pauses contribute to dramatic moments. When confronted with this performer, where is the incentive to interrupt? The incentive, rather, is to watch and be quiet and see what this confident performer has to show us. You might reply, well, yes, but this doesn't always work. Even though a well-polished performance may dramatically reduce the number of interruptions, what about the performer or the person who interrupts anyway, in spite of a well-polished performance? Or the person who is drunk, or stoned. Absolutely right. In the close-up magic setting, it is probably impossible to eliminate absolutely all interruptions. So, what do I do when they occur? Well, I must understand that what I don't want to do is to encourage combativeness. I want to diffuse combativeness. That is my personal top priority. I want to move past the interruption. If the interrupter said something amusing, I may smile, even laugh, and give him or her the attention that they want. And then I might also pause a few beats after I smile, so that the attention and focus shifts naturally back to me before I begin again. In the book Secrets and Mysteries, I suggested a sentence that I very often used, and still use, for those interrupters who say, "Well, I know how that trick was done." Since I have no idea whether or not they do know how the effect was done, the last thing I want to do is get into it with them. I want to diffuse the comment so that the attention of the group passes from it back to me and what I am doing. And so the sentence I use is actually 3 phrases, each a bit more direct than the one before. The sentence is, "Don't tell the others. Sell it to them later, when I'm finished." I might use the first part alone, "Don't tell the others." But if I want to make the point a little stronger, I would add the second phrase, "Sell it to them later." And if I want it to be very direct, I add the third phrase, "After I'm finished." I don't say this with a look that could kill, or with the look of a disapproving school teacher waiting for the class to get quiet. I say this rather with a smile, and if the interrupter is within touching range, I gently put my hand on the interrupter's forearm or wrist and press down ever so slightly to emphasize my point. It is all done gently, without a sense that I am reacting negatively to what this person is doing. Because close-up magic is an exceedingly intimate kind of situation, expecting people to be quiet all the time may be quite unrealistic. Close-up magic is not platform work. Consequently, people may not respect the rule that holds when they go to the theater, the rule that tells audience members to be silent during the show. For many people, in the close-up magic setting, for many gregarious people, joining verbally into the show is part of the fun of it for them. They enjoy talking to you during your performance, and some people need only the slightest opening to begin. And then there are those people who are drunk or high on drugs. Professional close-up magic brings you face-to-face with many such people. Is there anything that can be done when they appear and begin interrupting? Well, I am a firm believer in David Devant's famous motto, "All done by kindness." My own strategy for working with the drunk is first to exhibit a kind attitude and not a judgmental one. Sometimes, believe it or not, this actually works, but not always. There is, however, an ace that I have concealed in my sleeve. I don't have to perform for drunks. I don't have to perform for these people at all. I can stop if the situation is beyond what I want to deal with. If I'm in a public place or at a corporate cocktail party, there are always many other people who might be much more appreciative of my work. If the people for whom I am performing, or even if one of them, proves to be impossible, I simply finish the effect I started, thank them, and that's important, and move on, hopefully to more attentive people. In no sense, I repeat, do I want them to think I have judged them, which of course I have. For those magicians who do not perform publicly or professionally, I suppose there's always the sage advice of Nate Leipzig. namely, don't perform at all unless you're begged. If you're asked to perform, you refuse, you're asked again, and then you agree, you can pretty much expect an attentive audience. If you push yourself on people with, "Let me show you a trick," perhaps interruptions are part of the territory. "Let me show you a trick." Well, to me, that phrase, "let me show you a trick," is truly an awful way to begin any magical performance, whether professional or amateur, whether for strangers or my family and closest friends. Everyone, particularly our family and closest friends, deserve more from us than "let me show you a trick." Tricks, by definition, are rather trivial and superfluous enterprises. Even the phrase, "let me show you something I've been working on," while not very engaging, at least suggests that what is to follow is not trivial because it was important enough for you to work on it. As a footnote, I suppose I should add that I think it's a pity that so few magicians seem comfortable with the opening phrase, "let me show you something mysterious, a real mystery." My whole approach to the interrupter, then, is to exhibit a willingness to bend. This may not be the best approach or the approach that I would necessarily follow from the stage or platform, but I think it's the best approach for close-up magic because of the intimacy of the setting. In one sense, close-up magic demands living in the moment and responding to these actual spectators who are different from the spectators before and different from the next group of spectators to come. In close-up magic, I must interact with this particular group of people who are with me now as my audience. The success that I might achieve in this close-up setting certainly has a great deal to do with the quality and deceptiveness of my magic. But it also has a great deal to do with the quality of relationship that I am able to establish with this particular group of people now. If my magic deceives them, and if my audience enjoys this brief relationship with me, I will be a success as a magical entertainer. If, on the other hand, I reveal myself as someone who is rude and insensitive to their feelings, then my magic may be deceptive, but they will not like me, and I will have failed. To succeed in close-up magic, then, personally, I have worked to develop a sense of buoyancy in the performing moment, a willingness to roll with the punch, to flow with the stream, and to bend with the moment, and not to insist that everyone must be absolutely silent or else be labeled a heckler and then rudely insulted. The quality of the relationship that you are able to establish is as important for your success as is the deceptiveness of your magic. This realization, along with a strong dose of David Devant's kindness, are the keys to managing people successfully during a close-up magic performance.